you'd like to record, you should be free to.
Is it working? I hope so.
No doubt. Oh yeah, we're recording a podcast. Hi. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. Michelle and Gabby here coming at you on, I think this is going to be episode number 6. We're recording this on Sunday, January 25th. Should be going out shortly thereafter. Big thanks to everyone who has liked, subscribed, and shared. Really helps us get out there and get into the ears in front of more people. Appreciate everybody who's supported us on Ko-Fi. Don't forget you can wad up a couple dollars, throw it up the internet pipes over to us, and that really helps us keep the lights on and the hosting and that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, Gabby, how are you doing today, buddy?
I am doing fabulously today. Doing my best to brave the cold because I have gotten tons of snow where I live, like many other people. And I hope if you're listening to this, you're also staying warm, unless you live in a warm climate, in which case I'm very jealous. But yeah, I'm doing well. How are you, Michelle?
I'm doing pretty good. Like you, it is snow picnic out there, and I don't know what the next few days are going to look like temperature wise. But last time I checked, it's been snowing for like maybe 12 hours straight, and we've got some pretty good accumulation. And my dog is side eyeing me constantly, saying, "Hey, we haven't been out to the park in days. What's going on?" And I'm like, "Dude, dude, sorry." But yeah, so like other than that, I would say just chilling, but that seems like redundant in some sense. But no, for real, like yeah, it's been like a pretty relaxed day, all things considered, and I'm very grateful for that.
Sweet. I'm happy to hear it.
Thank you, thank you. So this is another episode where we didn't have any guest book. We've got some amazing guests booked in February. So we've got that to look forward to. I think this is our last no guest episode for more than a few weeks, which I don't know how I feel about that because I kind of feel like we're just hitting our stride with these, and it is what it is. I'm sure we'll be back to this at some point, but not for 6 weeks after this. We got some really good guests coming up after this. We've got talking with AP Strange again. We've got Mavius Lynn. We've got Catherine Lee. We've got a mystery guest at the end of February. And then we've got, oh, I'm going to mispronounce their name. Elhoem Leifer? Am I getting in the right ballpark there?
I believe it's Elohim.
Elohim.
Um,
Okay. Elohim Leafar?
I believe it's Lifar.
Leafar. We've got Elohim Leafar coming up. And then we've got another mystery guest coming up as well that I'm sure we will talk about a little bit more as those dates come up. Takes us into St. Patrick's Day, and we'll have some more. But yeah, woo, I'm excited. We've got a lot going on, and these no guest episodes are kind of just a moment to sit back and chill and drink our coffee. And
Right, right, absolutely.
Gabby, what's going on in your world? What were we talking about tonight?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Michelle and I we were talking about the various media that has influenced us and our spiritual magical practices in one way or another. And media is a very broad category, so we're including fiction, nonfiction, books, movies, TV shows, all of the above, art even. And yeah, and I think it'd be really fun to talk a little bit about why, these various media have influenced one of us. And for example, a show we've been watching together is Battlestar Galactica, the remake, not the original. And yeah, I'm a new fan to the series. I had never seen it before, never seen the original series either. When I was first introduced to it, I had a completely different idea of what it was going to be. I had expected, much more sort of like a your classic sci-fi, but there's actually a lot of really interesting spiritual and mythological elements woven into there that I never would have expected in a sci-fi show, and it was really interesting and surprising. But Michelle is much more of the expert on the show than I am because I'm a very new fan.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad you enjoy it. That show like showed up on my radar, and I
Yeah.
was in undergrad and one of my professors was like, "You should watch this." And I was like, I don't know. That sounds like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, right? Based on what I knew about like the early 80s, late 70s Battlestar Galactica. And they were like, no, no, seriously, check it out. It's really good. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll put it on. And I was like, okay, there's something here that I cannot put my finger on, but this is really cool, really well done, like really well shot. The story's engaging. And then, like, it's only 4 seasons long. Like every couple years, I would rewatch it just because, like, neurodivergent comfort TV shows. And then after I started like getting into like the spiritual and dare I say mystical side of things, I even started watching it in like a completely new light after that. Um, so it's got a lot of layers. Like Shrek. Pardon me, I had to say that. We could also talk about Shrek sometime.
Yes.
That's going to be a whole nother episode. I do want to do a Shrek episode, but it's going to be wrapped in with some other stuff. But anyway, yeah, Battlestar Galactica. One thing I really liked about it, and I didn't know there was like a mini series that preceded it, is like it just starts with the remnants of humanity on the run, and it doesn't even like really take the time to explain that the apocalypse just happened, because of course all of that happened in the miniseries, but I didn't know any of that, so I was just super engaged by this bold storytelling, right? And then it kind of forces you to work backwards and put some of the pieces together, or you could just watch the miniseries. But anyway, like I guess, yeah, I don't even know where to begin. Like for people who haven't seen it, like the entire premise of the show is that like humanity has advanced. They create like robot servants, and the robot servants turn on them and start a war against humanity. And that was the premise for the original Battlestar Galactica. And the remake takes place, I think, like in universe, like 40 years after that first. The robot servants are called Cylons, right? Takes place after the first Cylon War. And there was apparently a period of peace after that first war. And then after that, the Cylons just came out of nowhere and completely just like obliterated humanity. And the show starts with humanity running, and there's like barely anybody left. And it's so frantic. And there's so many great characters. And it's just, I don't even know. Jump in anywhere, Gabby.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I really love that you mentioned all of the different characters because I feel like they really make up the heart of the show. All the different character arcs because each character, even some like the smaller side characters, they are all given so much development and like each character like they have either like a goal or something like to really strive for, something that really drives them, and seeing that sort of change and evolve over time as they undergo different trials and challenges is absolutely fascinating. And should we talk like a little bit about like who some of these characters are? Like for example, one of my favorites is Starbuck. And she is kind of like this absolute badass. She has like this really like tough exterior to her. And, as the series progresses, you kind of see that she does have like this kind of vulnerability underneath that she kind of hides by being, so good at what she does. And it's just fascinating to see her. shift and change as a character. I don't want to give too much away because this is a series that, like Twin Peaks, which is one of my favorites, you really do have to experience like firsthand to get all of it out of it.
Right. Yeah. And then there's still like, yeah, you and I, you're just on the first watch through, right? And we just got into like, I'd say like the first quarter of season 3, and there's so much that's still going to happen in like the next 2 seasons that I'm really excited for you to see. And there's so much that I definitely have going to have to come back to this show after we watch it and do an episode on it, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Another character, and like fans of the show like may want to fight me on this, but one of my favorites is Dr. Baltar. Um, he is just like such a punchable face for 99% of the show, but also like so relatably human, right? Like he is like almost like I want to say like a collective shadow representation in a very Jungian sense of like most of the stuff that everybody's trying to hide, in the way that like they work that into the narrative and character progression. And I want to be really careful about what I say to not spoil anything for Gabby. Um, so definitely gonna have to come back to this, but like, where was I gonna go with this even? Yeah, like Baltar's just, he starts out the series as like this like super intelligent, don't ever correct him, like Dr. Slimeball, who is just like way oversexed and most likely responsible for the wiping out of humanity because he got honeypotted into giving the Cylons the secret codes to the Humans Defense Network. But, you know, like somehow they still make this character last through 4 seasons. Um, the writing, I'm not doing it justice by what I'm saying, but I dare say the writing is inspired. Um, there's a lot in this show, like Twin Peaks, I think, where the symbolism speaks for itself, right? Like maybe we could talk a little bit about like the symbolism, right? Like there's very much like the original Battlestar Galactica, I believe, was written by some Mormons or ex-Mormons. So they leaned very heavily on like biblical um allusions in some spots. Like there's whole like the whole like political like 12 colonies, 12, you know, the number 12 is a big thing in the show. But also in the remake, there's a whole lot of pagan deities coming up, right? Like characters named Athena, Apollo, Isis. Um, the show does not shy away from issues of faith and spirituality, is what I wanted to go with there. And I just remembered my original, what I wanted to say. I think what I really appreciate about this show so much and why I keep coming back to it is like we said, like it starts after a huge collective trauma and hits the ground running from there. I don't think there's anybody listening right now who can't like what's the word I'm looking for? Jive with the idea of collective trauma and still needing to move forward despite that, right? Am I making any sense here?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're making complete sense. Yeah, the show really does sort of present this idea of what does humanity look like when humanity refuses to give up, even in the face of the impossible? Um, and, you know, different characters respond to that in very different ways. And each way is just so human, even if it's ways that we might disagree with or, you know, might say, like, wow, that's like the worst way you could possibly react to that. But it's still very human. Like everything is very relatable, and you could see a person responding in that way. and also seeing what happens when people are repeatedly tested and given the opportunity to correct past mistakes and sort of end harmful cycles. It's sort of like there was like this huge collective trauma, and sort of the maladaptive coping mechanisms of dealing with that trauma, and how do you move on from that? How do you heal from that? Um, and it is very inspiring to like sort of see these people, no matter how much they go through, repeatedly like survive and work towards a better future for all of them, even as they grapple with some very tough, complicated moral decisions along the way, because they are in a war. And the Cylons, like, it's not like this clear good versus evil all the time. Both sides sometimes have these moments of being very, very cruel to one another and engaging in acts that are very horrific, but then they also engage in acts that are like very, I guess, driven by something that seems much larger than themselves. Because even the Cylons in this series, even though typically sci-fi presents spirituality and technology as totally opposite, they can't mix together. In this series, a lot of the Cylons are very like religious or spiritual, and they feel like guided by this higher power. And what does it mean when people are guided by that, good or bad? So it's just like a very interesting series. And Michelle mentioned that it feels very Jungian at times, because there are sort of aspects of these characters that you may be able to see in yourself, good or bad.
Most definitely. And I think there's a lot of media, some of my favorite media, where I can definitely say, like, I see a lot of like my own X, Y, or Z in this or that character from this show or something. And that seems to be like the media that I tend to gravitate towards, right? But I do see a lot of that inside Battlestar Galactica. And God, I'm such a nerd for it, but it's really just such a good show. Like you brought up something, and I'm trying to remember, go back. The thought, I'm gonna have to get a sticky pad out here because my brain is not braining. Um, but yeah, like, oh, yeah, both sides are very much um working from like we're at a point in the show now, right, where they're looking for Earth, because both sides are looking for a new planet to settle down and make a new home, right? And like the humans are working from like these 3,000-year old prophecies from what scrolls of Pythia, uh that seem to have like some quality of mysticism about them, where they're actually like predicting in weird, impossible ways that the story is going to progress. And it's, I think a lot of people might be able to see something very interesting in that. Is where I want to say what I want to say with that. Like, have we gotten to the point? We did see the Cylon hybrids.
Yes.
Okay, did you like see how they just like kind of lay in that tub and just kind of like free associate, spout like whatever's like coming out on their mind?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like that reminds me so much of like way back in the day, like working with like the Estes method, or like doing like any kind of channeling, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a like a major, yeah, I definitely think there's a major connection there.
It kind of reminds me of playing with the cipher as well. That's what it always made me think of, anyhow.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the relationship between the humans and the Cylons, it really is in a way very similar to kind of the relationship between humans and kind of like whatever you want to call like angels, fairies, non-human intelligences, ultra terrestrials, whatever kind of the buzzword is for like these beings that are not human, but they are intelligent and do share certain traits with us, at least enough that we can kind of communicate with one another. Because yeah, like you said, it is sort of like the Estes method, this sort of channeling, and Baltar's relationship with Six is, very spiritual in certain ways. It's almost like she is this angel and devil on his shoulder at times, claiming that she kind of like speaks for God and is telling him what God wants him to do, which I think is fascinating because you kind of hear in real life like these people who claim to be working on behalf of God, but then their actual actions kind of doesn't really quite line up with that. So it does kind of speak to one of the risks involved with, say, spirit work, that not every voice that wants to speak with you and wants to guide you is necessarily, they're not all necessarily guiding you in the best direction for you.
That's not a bad point to make. I'm curious, we were talking a little bit about the relationships between the human and the Cylon being similar to like on this side of like the TV between like human and other. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I want to make sure that like I'm not sure I'm quite following you, but I think I can get there.
Yeah, kind of like they're these beings that are, not human. I guess like a good parallel would be like thought forms or like egregores. So sort of like these beings that kind of came from us, like we created them, but they have their own sort of like autonomous way of being and their own goals, their own, yeah. And they also communicate in ways that we cannot. Like they have this sort of pseudo hive mind situation going on. They have like this, like there can be multiple versions of the same one, but they're all unique and different, which kind of parallels some of the like Greek gods. So like there's one perspective where like Greek gods, so like say the warlike version of Aphrodite, and then like the love and beauty version of Aphrodite. There's one perspective where they're essentially both Aphrodite, but they're both separate autonomous versions of Aphrodite. Um, and I think that's sort of like where the parallel comes in, where they're these beings that they're non-human, but they're closer to us than I think some of the human characters in the show would like to admit.
I can pick up what you're putting down. Okay, I'm following you now. No, absolutely. And you bring up another interesting point. There's so many episodes and moments where it's subtly and not so subtly shown that, like you said, like the Cylons, like these artificial life forms, are more human than some of the human characters would like to admit. There's a whole lot of projection going on. Like the humans will be facing a Cylon and being saying like, "Oh, well, at least I don't do X, Y, and Z like you do," while they're doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the Cylons are kind of like a stand-in for the other, in that sense. It's sort of like they are, everything that humanity kind of wants to reject about itself. But at the same time, they still have like all those same traits. Really, the only difference is, they're artificial. Like some of them are more clearly machine-like, but there are ones that are very human-like and have very human aspects and traits. But despite that, they're still othered. They're still seen as, because they're not human, it's hard for the human characters to really admit to those similarities.
Yeah, and I wonder how much like that says like this show kind of sits in an interesting spot, right? Where it was like made right around the time like YouTube just came out and was getting big, but like smartphones weren't a thing, social media was not a thing, right? But it really makes me think like how much of this like artificial life form could be projected onto our phone screens and that idea, and how much are we like projecting onto what we intake there without even kind of realizing it, or asking ourselves to stop and think about what we're projecting, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a really salient point. Yeah, I think projection is like that's one of like the core aspects of shadow work, right? Like learning that the traits that we often really kind of dislike or kind of bother us or activate something in us and other people, sometimes we possess those traits ourselves and we're projecting something onto the other person. And I think with like phone screens it makes it even easier because there's that extra degree of separation. You're only getting a very limited view of a person, of a situation. And so it's much easier for you to kind of put your own narrative into it that might not be there.
Most definitely. And speaking from experience on that, I was really bad at that at one point in time and probably still do it to some degree, but hopefully have developed a little bit more awareness. But yeah, like, and the phone screen is just like such an easy, willing, like receptacle because it's like, in a weird sense, like already two dimensional. It's like just ready for like, I don't know. I don't think I'm quite ready to write that essay just yet, but there's something there that would be worth exploring.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's an idea that's definitely worth looking into more and maybe down the line doing an episode about something like that, about projection, identity, social media, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. What else have we got? Like, I don't know much we wanted to stick with Battlestar Galactica. Um, trying to think if there's anything that's oh, Gabby, there's so much to talk about there, but I want to wait until like, I don't know, midway through season four. There's there's a lot. Um, I'm really giddy thinking about it and I can't wait. Because
Yay.
I think it's gonna blow your mind and I'm excited to see your reaction. Um,
I'm excited too.
I don't know. I could talk about any TV show. Like I'm such a nerd for this kind of thing. Like what initially like pulled you towards Twin Peaks, Gabby? Because I think like of the two of us, like I think you're definitely like the bigger Twin Peaks fan, right?
I've definitely been a fan for a while. Yeah, I first heard about the series back when I was in college. So this was right around the time The Return first came out. So like it was actively airing at this point, in like what, like 2017 or something like that. Um, and my college roommate at the time was very into the show. They were a huge, huge, huge fan, and they constantly like pestered me about watching this show. It's like, you need to watch Twin Peaks. The Return is out now. You need to watch it. But I did not watch it at that point. I was like, oh, I'll get to it at some point. And years later, I had graduated college. I was working like my first post college job. I start getting these weird owl synchronicities. And when I say owl synchronicities, I don't mean like, oh, I see an owl here or there. I mean, everywhere I look, I see an owl. I even had like these chocolates, and the chocolates had owls on the wrapper. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was an abundance of owls. People were gifting me owl figurines. I have so many owl figurines from this period of my life. And it coincided with some other spiritual stuff going on with me at the time. And as I was doing my research, the show Twin Peaks kept coming up over and over again. And like, oh, this phenomenon is discussed in Twin Peaks. And so I finally watch it, and it's just a synchronicity storm, one after another. It's like, oh, so this is why my friend wanted me to watch this series like 3 years ago. So I was a little late to the party, but it turned me into a lifelong fan now. I do a rewatch at least once a year, sometimes more, because it is one of my, kind of comfort shows. But yeah, there is a lot of truth embedded in that series. And if you have ever had any kind of synchronistic experiences, I definitely recommend watching it, because even if you don't experience similar synchronicities to the show, the ways in which the characters respond to those synchronicities just feel so real and so relatable. Like whenever Cooper has one of his weird dreams, it's like I know how that feels. Um, so yeah, definitely check it out. It's a fun show.
It is a lot of fun and it definitely has a lot of truth to it. I still don't know how I feel about like the return being so different in tone than the original. Like we've talked about this on like previous episodes with like that homey, comfy feeling is definitely gone in the return, whereas it was very prevalent in the original. And I can see why they did that, and I completely agree with why they did that. But it's a lot to process. I think is where I'm going to leave that particular point. But I absolutely like fell in love with like the characters in Twin Peaks almost immediately. Like what Andy? Um
Aw.
oh my gosh. Yeah, he's like the goofiest like law enforcement officer ever, like almost a parody, but not a parody. It's like he's a very real and like fleshed out like human being who is like has multiple angles and sides, right? And I think like at least in like the first series, like season 1 and 2, right? Like David Lynch and what Mark Frost or
Yep.
Mark Frost, okay. Yeah, they do such a great way of like showing like how many angles and like how faceted this character is. And he's not the only one, right? Like, and I think a lot of that is might not be missing from TV now, but it was certainly missing from TV at the time that it came out, right?
Hmm.
My brain just stopped braining, Gabby.
Oh no.
Um, that's like what happens. I get like really comfortable in these talks and like everything just kind of like, oh, okay, nervous system, you're in your element. We're just going to relax and you're not going to think now. So, um, where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I can always talk more about Twin Peaks.
Hmm,
I
please
guess.
do, by all means. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you brought up Andy because he is one of my favorite characters, especially in the original series. And I think it was so important and such like an important choice to have Andy be so integral in defeating Bob at the end of the series because I really do think that Andy kind of represents like kind of like what when we talk about like purity in spirituality it sometimes has like this connotation of like certain like weird connotations to it but like I feel like Andy is like what is really meant by purity like he's pure of heart like he's the only one who really cries when Laura dies out of the police department. Everyone else is just more professional and very matter of fact about it, even though it's a kind of small town and everyone knows each other. Like Andy is inconsolable, like he is sobbing. And at every step of the way, he's just so emotional about everything, and he doesn't hide it, even though, or well, he tries to hide it from certain characters, especially Lucy because he's trying to impress her. But around other people, he usually doesn't hide it. Um, and yeah, he's just a genuinely good person for no reason other than that's just how he is. That's just how he comports himself in his every day to day. And I think that's really why, out of all of the main characters, he's one of the few that actually gets a face to face meeting with the fireman and is told like okay this is what you have to do step by step because really the only other characters who have like that kind of meeting with him is Cooper and Freddie the guy with the green glove everyone else kind of gets more of secondhand guidance.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't even think about like the conversation with the fireman and like, yeah, and I would even go so far to say as like between Cooper, Freddie, and Andy, I think there's a tie between like who got the clearer directive from the fireman. And I think Andy got some really clear instructions from the firemen. No, good point. And yeah, just completely pure of heart. Wasn't there in like season 2 of Twin Peaks? Didn't he have to shoot somebody and he was like completely inconsolable after that as well?
Yeah. There was a part with Jacques Renault. So he was one of the Canadian brothers who worked at One Eye Jacks and also at the Roadhouse, kind of bringing drugs like the cocaine, over into the town of Twin Peaks. And yeah, that was like a big part of this show where Andy was first learning how to use his gun because he didn't even know how to use it when Cooper first, rolled up into town. And there was like this whole sort of like training montage off screen, I assume, where he really like learns how to shoot and everything. And yeah, Jacques Renault was about to shoot Harry, and then all of a sudden Andy just like steps up and he shoots him, and he doesn't die at that point, but he got a good shot on him and sort of saved the day. So it was his redemption from earlier where he had accidentally dropped his gun and misfired.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, I didn't remember the whole misfire thing. I just remember he was kind of like not great with the gun and then all of a sudden was great with the gun. But yeah, that was a really intense scene. And just a moment to like salute like how every single TV show in like the late 80s and maybe like first couple years of the 90s had some kind of plot point about cocaine coming across the border. Just every TV show had it. Twin Peaks not alone there. But anyway, but what else could we say? Like there's so much we could say. I like these episodes where we don't have notes, but at the same time it's kind of maddening because I don't know if I'm losing everybody without like notes or a game plan, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to babble too much, so I get what you mean, but like at the same time it is fun to kind of see where the conversation takes us and what comes up naturally.
Right, 100%. And feel free to babble away. Like that's kind of like that was my philosophy like with these like no guest episodes. It's like I'm just going to give myself permission to like just babble and see what happens and definitely I think I'm making some headway there with with that. So, yeah, by all means.
I mean, if we want, we could talk a little bit about sort of the mythology behind it a little bit, and I guess to real world parallels.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
like that might be kind of fun because we mentioned in previous episodes where we talked about Twin Peaks that it is sort of like an Easter egg hunt with different references to mythology, folklore, more modern day, like UFO folklore. Like there's a whole bunch in there. Like, for example, just sort of right off the top of my head, like the owl stuff that I was going through and is a big part of Twin Peaks. So in the show of Twin Peaks, the owls, so they say the owls are not what they seem. So by that they mean like the owls, they're not just regular owls. They're essentially these beings. So like beings like Bob or the fireman or the arm. It's sort of like an animal form for these beings. And in UFO folklore, there are a lot of people who claim that when they are interacting with like these beings, whether they be aliens from another planet or beings from another dimension, um, kind of like whatever they are, because it isn't always quite clear what they are or where they come from. They can take the form of owls. That's like one of the major um, forms that are very commonly associated with them. And some people say it's because, the face of an owl kind of looks like a gray alien. There are theories that it's a screen memory situation. So the
Yes.
beings themselves believe that, you might freak out if you see an alien, but if you see an owl, that's more comforting, a little bit less intimidating. So maybe you won't freak out as much. So yeah, there are a lot of different theories as to like why these experiencers see owls. But it's regardless, it's a very common symptom.
Right. Yeah. And one author that, like a modern day, like mythos tracker on that, Mike Cleland, I used to follow a lot of his work, but he collected a lot of stories about owls, synchronicities, and UFOs and wrote like 3 books on it. Um, and it's been a while since I've read any of that, but I would definitely like recommend that work. It goes very well with the Twin Peaks. Like, okay, so yes, just all of it. I've got like tingles going up my spine. The other thing that I always thought was really cool with Twin Peaks and the mythos was the whole Black Lodge, White Lodge thing, right?
Mm.
Like, that was something that Deputy Hawk explained and kind of named in universe. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so that was something that was explained in universe as something from like his native um, First Nations type of people's explanation for these realms. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, you are, though
Oh,
I think David Lynch kind of might have mixed that up a little bit because sort of like the Black Lodge, White Lodge, it's kind of more of a theosophical idea, so I'm not
oh,
sure. So it's hard to say if that really is like a genuine like First Nations idea or if it's sort of the Theosophical Society saying it's a First Nations idea. So there is kind of a little bit of trickiness there. Because like there's sort of like this idea in theosophy and also in thelema and Western general sort of Western esotericism of these two kind of like warring factions, the Black Lodge and the White Lodge. So sort of like shorthand, the Black Lodge is generally the people who do like quote unquote evil magic, and then the White Lodge are the ones doing the quote unquote good magic in those systems.
gotcha. Yeah, no, I can pick up what you're putting down, and I'm familiar with those ideas. And yeah, you're right. That probably is more of a oh, what is that word I'm looking for? Blavatsky theosophical idea, and that would be anyway. Yeah, I it always really rubbed me the wrong way. That was like Black Lodge evil, like White Lodge good, like the whole like racial overtones and connotations with all of that just really needs to go like jump out a window and not come back. But that's kind of how I feel about a lot of like the racial stuff that like percolated up through theosophy, right?
100%. Yeah, because it really is, unfortunately, like the racism is kind of baked in at all levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's like another thing. Like with this, I guess, like esotericism, like most things spiritual or religious, really does rely on like a tradition of some sort, or like a chain of custody of like documents and experiences and treatises and theories that many times come to us from much older sources where times were different. And I know you and I throwing books back at each other and different essays back. One lot that we've read lately is like, yeah, there's just a lot of like really outdated racial and biological ideas baked into this stuff. And you got to kind of be careful or else it can like make its way back into like at least the local zeitgeist, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It really is something where you have to be discerning about it. Um, and like that's why it's so important that while you are researching, whether it's a more modern source or some of these, more historical sources, that you're not taking everything at face value, that you're not just accepting one person's opinion and perspective as the absolute truth, because all of us are human, and as we are engaging with these higher powers, higher ideas, we're filtering them through our perception. And so that means they're going to be colored by whatever internalized biases that we just naturally have, both conscious and unconscious. And the people of the past are no different. And so it's very important to be very mindful of that and to really like filter out, like, okay, what is like the truth behind this and what is this person's bias coming out? Because it's possible that they did glean some very important information, but for whatever reason, they saw it a certain way because they either didn't think it was possible to be any different or because they didn't want it to be any different. And that's another area where it's important to be extra discerning.
Right. Yeah. Like these ideas come down like the pipes. You could say from like, the higher realms or like the stairs. And like as they come down and step down, like each stair, like they change in their perception a little bit. And by the time they get to us, it's like they've traveled through like these Byzantine pathways of like subconscious and superconscious ideas. Most of these pathways are formed by us and our experiences. And they're definitely going to be colored by us. So that's all to say, like, question everything. If you're pursuing these paths, question everything except the stuff that you're not supposed to question. And then with that stuff, be sure that you question it extra hard, right?
Absolutely. Be very, very cautious of those who try to state that their way is the only way and that anything else is wrong. Because yeah, that's where things can get very dicey.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I was going to make a joke off the back of that, but I'm going to have to edit that in later or something because I don't know what's going on with my brain, Gabby. I need like less caffeine or more, or I these conversations like make my head swim a little bit, but in a good way.
Oh, are you doing all right? Like, do you want to end it early tonight? Do you want to keep going?
Oh, we'll
How are
keep
you
going for a
feeling?
little bit longer. Yeah, this is fascinating. And off the record, I'll have to remind myself to cut this, but like, I can still like kind of feel myself like shaking off like some of those like denser energies that I was like struggling with like in the earlier part of the year, or like last year or like, like 6 months ago. And this podcast is really helping with that, but I'm like feeling it like shake off in like real time, which is a little like interesting is the only way I can put that.
I hear you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're shifting out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, let's circle back a little bit. Um, Battlestar Galactica. Aside from Starbuck, who would you say is your second favorite character?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would have to say Athena Sharon right now. She's been very interesting lately.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I get that. She is, well,
Yeah.
she is a complex character. We really
Yeah.
didn't even like talk about her. She is the Cylon that, or a half human child with a colonial officer and who ended up like spoiler here for like early or late season 2 stuff, like ends up like becoming a colonial officer herself, despite the fact that she's a Cylon. So she's kind of like a lot of the other characters that we were looking at, like, Starbuck, we were saying that like has that tough outer shell, but has like the hidden traumas and stuff like that. It just occurred to me that Athena slash Sharon is almost the inverse of that because everybody kind of knows her secrets. She hasn't really been allowed to have to have her own personal space or her own interiority, right? She's like constantly under a microscope.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think that's like part of what makes her so fascinating is kind of like seeing like her journey kind of like with the humans, right? Because she is like this Cylon, and for a while she thought she was. I'm pretty. Yeah, didn't she think she was human for a while, and then like figured out that she was a Cylon? Or is that the other Sharon?
That was the other
Or
Sharon.
is the other Sharon? Okay,
Yeah, this Athena was
right. She was.
always, yeah, she always knew who she was.
Ooh, yes, that is a good point about knowing who you are, and I feel like that connects kind of well with Twin Peaks as well in a weird way
Oh, go,
because
yeah,
yeah, because there is like this sort of playing with of identity because like our characters shift identity at the end of the series. So like Cooper becomes Richard, Diane becomes Linda, Laura becomes Carrie Page. So there is sort of like this stripping away of their identity and they're thrown into like this completely new world and kind of like what does that mean? Um, yeah, I don't really know what to say more about that, but that made me think of that.
yeah. No, I think there's an immense power that's the writers of both stories are at least saying with the power of knowing who oneself is. And it seems like in both shows, how the characters get to that answer is through, I'm just going to say it, like through initiation via trauma.
Yeah.
Like, I guess that's one way to get there. But on the flip side of that is kind of interesting. And I would leave it to like the listeners to go and watch it because I don't want to spoil anything with like the Cylons and Sharon and Athena and all of that. But there's definitely some stuff pretty early on in the series about the dangers of not knowing who you are, right?
Mhm.
Which also I think Baltar, poster boy for that as well, right? Like he is always just trying to be somebody for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, knowing thyself is one of like the core maxims in a lot of spiritual esoteric traditions. Um, like I would argue that it's very, very difficult to practice any kind of magic if you don't really have a solid understanding of kind of who you are, what your values are, and kind of what your goals are. Because if you don't have like a good understanding of that, it can be very difficult to know like what do I use magic for? Like what purpose is it supposed to serve? Um, but once you do understand, who you are, it's much easier to kind of say like, okay, like this is why I'm doing magic. Like this is why I'm studying this philosophical spiritual tradition. I have a clear direction. I know where I'm going, and I can't be thrown off course by, other opinions and other people who may or may not have my best interest at heart. Because, like with Baltar, there are a lot of people who will happily use your skills and your abilities to further their own ends, even if it hurts you in the process. So it's very important to know who you are so you can really push back against that kind of influence.
Yes, yes, yes. Hands clapping, like all parties agree on that. That is, couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. And now I'm wondering like what they were saying in Twin Peaks at the end whenever everybody's name changed in relation to that. Like almost like there's like a collective amnesia going on right now. If you take the theory that like Cooper and Carrie Page like came out of the screen insofar as when they were talking to the lady who actually owned that house in real life, right? I'm going to go with that theory that there's a collective amnesia going on right now. I like that.
Yeah, I do like that theory.
Trying to think of like who my second favorite character would be. Because Starbuck always gets like the favorite character nomination, right? For just so
Yes.
many reasons. My heart always goes out to Chief Tyrrell, but
Ooh.
I think Carl Agathon and I think Chief Tyrrell gets the honorable mention, but I think Carl Agathon and like Sharon Agathon slash Athena, I think they split for like my second favorite character because Carl, and to a slightly lesser degree, but understandably lesser degree, they always do the right thing, even when it's unpopular. And
Mm.
that's so hard to do. And I think it's not hard to really appreciate them and to want to be like that, right?
Right. They really are inspiring characters in a lot of ways.
Yeah, especially like in this day and age, like both of them, a lot of people in that show have no qualms speaking truth to power. And I think that's something we need a lot of right now.
Absolutely agree.
Well, Gabby, I think my brain might be sufficiently fried. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm good to wrap up if you're ready to finish up this episode. I think this was a good one. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did have a lot of fun too. It was very, thank you. I had a lot of fun too. This was a lot of fun. Um,
Yay.
yay. So thank you, everybody. This was another episode of The Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. If you'd like, you can send us an email and check the show notes for our email address. We would love to hear from you, who you are, what you're listening to podcast wise these days, what you like about our show, or what you don't like about our show. And notes, ideas, suggestions, send it over to us. We'd love to read it. Would love to know who you are, where you're listening from. You can support us by going to our Ko-Fi link and wadding up $1 or two, tossing it up the internet pipes to us. Helps us with the hosting costs and keeps the lights on. We appreciate it. And we've got um, a huge lineup of really exciting guests coming up after this. So we hope you'll stick around and visit. And we really appreciate each and every one of you who are liking this show and listening. It means the world to us. We're having a lot of fun making it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It's been so awesome hearing all of your feedback. And it's been a lot of fun being on this awesome ride with all of you. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you next week.
Ooh.
Yay.